What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. It's Brendan Boyd, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking about 7 tips to grow and scale your podcast. So if you're a brand new podcaster, or if you're a seasoned podcaster, but your show is kind of stale, you definitely do not want to miss this episode. Make sure that you tap in. All right, y'all, so before we get into the episode, make sure you join my text community. That's 213-410-4920. Get access to daily motivation, free workshops, collaborations, and spontaneous information that you only get if you're tapped into the community, right? So tap in. Text the word daily to 213-410-4920. I'll see you guys on the episode. All right, y'all, so let's just get into it. The number one tip that I have for you to grow and scale your podcast is to just get started. Do you know how many of us procrastinate? Say we're going to do something, and this might even be you. You've been talking about a podcast. You've been thinking about a podcast. You've been imagining how great you would be on a podcast, what guests you would have on your podcast, but you just haven't started. Well, this is what I want you to do. This is your wake-up call. I want you to select a date. Go on your phone right now, right in the calendar, select a date. Maybe it's tomorrow. Maybe it's 2 days from now. Maybe it's this weekend. Select a date, commit to a time, and just go, right? The first tip is going to be just start. Just start the podcast. All right, tip number 2. So tip number 2 to grow and scale your podcast is to let people know that you have a podcast. Do you know how many people that have a podcast and actually release episodes don't even let people know they have a podcast, or don't even let people know they actually have a brand new episode? Listen, your podcast should come up every single chance you get. I was just at the gym the other day, and I was talking to somebody that kept complimenting me on my legs. And he was like, yo, what you got going on today? I was like, yo, man, well, I'm actually going to go shoot a new podcast episode. He's like, what? You got a podcast? Yo, send me the link. So I sent him the link. So now it's just a reminder that every single opportunity I have that I speak with people, I let them know, like, hey, listen, I got a podcast. Do you like podcasts? I would love for you to check mine out. Let me send you a link. So let me give you guys a couple of other people that should know that you got a podcast, all right? Family should know. You should have a family text. Every time you drop an episode, text your family. I do the same thing. I don't care whether they watch it or not, but they're going to know, right? Text your family. Maybe on a couple of group texts. Text your friends. Maybe you got an inner circle of friends, right? People that you talk to every single day. They need to know, and they need to share. Email list, right? Maybe you're part of a work text list. Maybe you got a virtual community. Send it to them. Email blast. Make sure you email blast. Make sure that you posting clips, and that clips are giving call to action for them to go to the episode. That might be a link in the bio, right? Make sure that you go live, drop a new episode and go live. Drop a story, tweet. There's so many different ways that you can promote your episodes. So you should have a PPP, a post-production publish plan, a PPPP. Yes, you should have a PPPP, and we'll do this for a whole nother video. But basically, it's your post-production publish plan, or your post-podcast publish plan. And what this is going to be the 5 to 10 things. You're going to do this every single time you release a podcast episode. So you know, at least when every single episode goes out, it has to run through your PPPP and test these 5 to 10 things that's going to give your podcast episode reach. So tip number 2 is make sure you're letting as many people know as possible that you got a podcast. Tip number 3, focus on a niche. Do you know how many podcasters have podcasts that are just broad? Yo, we talk about business. Yo, we talk about food. Yo, we talk about cars. What if you were talking about online e-commerce businesses that have scaled to over 7 figures in 12 months or less? That's a very specific group of businesses. And guess what? Now you have a targeted niche. You can speak to these people, and now people listen to your podcast. They know exactly what the podcast is about. What if you talk about alkaline vegan meals? So now people know specifically that your podcast, they're going to get all the information around alkaline vegan meals and hear from you and from guests and just get all the drip. That's way more interesting than just a podcast about cooking or about food, right? So you want to niche down as specific as possible. So when you communicate your podcast to people, it's going to be so specific that they're either going to be excited about it or ask you, how'd you come up with that? Which is way better than having such a broad topic, okay? Tip number 4 is engage. So you guys are getting comments, right? from your podcast episodes. You're getting downloads, right? You're getting comments maybe on the stories. You're getting comments maybe on the post. You're getting emails back, right? You're getting response from text. But do you know how many people engage? The percentage of podcasters or just people in general that will take the time to engage with their audience is really, really low. So you will stand out. And not only will you stand out, you will start building a deeper relationship with your audience if you would simply just engage with them. So every opportunity that you have with your podcast audience to help you grow and scale your podcast, you want to take that opportunity and engage with your audience. That's going to create a tighter bond and a tighter relationship for their favorite podcast and for their favorite podcast host. So tip number 4 is make sure that you are engaging. Tip number 5, focus on the fundamentals. So what are the fundamentals? Well, you need to have a podcast. You need to decide when you are going to be releasing a podcast. You need to be consistent with releasing that podcast. You should stick to your PPPP, right? And make sure that you have process, right? You should have a process of booking guests. You have a process of following up. You should have a process of your equipment. You should also, like I said, release on the same day. You should promote your podcast after, promote your podcast before. You should just stick to the fundamentals. The fundamentals is what's going to help you grow and scale. And once you master the fundamentals, you're just going to get better and better and better. Now, look, I got 2 podcasts and it's like I don't even got to think about the fundamentals because they're so ingrained. I could just knock them out quickly and effortlessly. And that's exactly how you need to do. You need to get down to exactly what you need from equipment, software, hardware, the process, bringing on a guest, what happens before the podcast is scheduled, what happens after, what happens during editing. All these things will help you grow and scale. All right. All these will help you grow and scale. And that's tip number 5. So tip number 6, and I'm going to talk very, very clearly and slowly. You need to produce content consistently. So what does that mean? That means once you decide what day of the week that your podcast is going to be on, what I need you to do is commit to that and do not let anything steer you away from releasing a podcast episode on that date. And listen, I'm no angel, right? I had a date before and I missed a date, right? But when I got serious about growing my podcast, when I got serious about growing my show, I recommitted that and I made sure that I did not miss that date. So you want to make sure that you commit to a date. You want to make sure that you produce content and produce your podcast consistently, right? And you should have so many podcasts shot that you got like 4 in the bucket, 5 in the bucket. So every single week, you're not rushing to do a podcast, edit and publish it and promote it all in the same week. You should have a runway of podcast episodes that are just queued up, ready to be edited and promoted and published. That's how you should be shooting. And if you're starting a podcast for the first time, you should run with like 3 or 4 episodes, produce those episodes, record those episodes before you even release your first podcast. You do not want to produce, edit, and publish a podcast all in the same week. You're not going to be able to keep up with that. It's going to be draining and feel overwhelming, especially if you have a podcast show that is driven by having guests on the show. So you definitely want to make sure that you commit to a date, you're consistent, you're producing, you're scheduling, and you're following through, right? So tip number 6 is make sure you produce consistently. Tip number 7, do not give up on an episode. Do you know how many times an episode will come out and as soon as it comes out, you're excited about it for 24 hours, right? And then after that 24 hours, maybe 48, you stop talking about it, you start pushing it, you start promoting it, and it just dies. And then you just worry about the next episode. Well, let me let you know something. Your podcast episode isn't going to die, all right? The podcast episode is anchored and it's evergreen. So it's going to be around forever. And your guest isn't going to promote it because that's not what guests do. You think they are, but they're not. So it's up to you and your post-podcast publish plan, and also just the mere value that you're going to be providing, that you continue to just promote it and keep it alive and push it out and just work it. Do not let your podcast episodes die after you release it. Don't just be excited for 24 to 48 hours. And then once that excitement is over, you just don't even talk about that episode no more. You definitely 100% need to be promoting and pushing and sharing that episode so you can get more and more views and stay involved with each and every episode for as long as possible. And obviously, some episodes are going to be more popular than others. Some guests are going to be a little bit more dynamic than others. You may have a better, podcast conversation with a particular guest versus, one that you may have from a former guest or a former episode. But at the same time, work the episodes that perform well, because the ones that perform well, they can still perform, right? So that's tip number 7. All right, y'all. So I gave you 7 tips to grow and scale your podcast. So now that you have this information, I need you to implement this information. If you have any questions, do me a favor and leave a comment below. And listen, if any of these tips helped you, or if you're going to run these tips, do me a favor and like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And matter of fact, share this video out to other podcasters or other people you know that are thinking about starting a podcast. All right. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you all on the next video. And podcasters, how would you like to make 5 or 6 figures with your podcast? Did you know that most podcasters do not make any revenue? It's because they think they need brand deals, sponsorships, and a large audience to monetize your show. But what if I told you don't need none of that? Just a simple 4-step framework to position your show to be monetized. And I can give it again completely for free. All you need to do is head over to podcast2profits.live, and I'll see you in this exclusive training. I'm going to give you all the game. What are you waiting for? Head over to the training. Let's go.